Welcome to Classic Burners. On today's episode, we'll be featuring GKAE from the MSK AWR cruise. So stand by, hop on board, and don't miss the bus. Welcome to Classic Burners. Here we are in the house with GKAE. Appreciate you coming on, taking the time to be out here.
Thanks for having me.
We know that you're not in the area locally, so it's a blessing to have you in.
Thanks, man.
Cool. Well, let's get right into it. In Classic Burners, we want to get into artists' individual history and everything. So with that being said, we want to go into your early history, how you found out about Graph, what were your first experiences, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I grew up in the San Fernando Valley for the most part, West Valley, Canoga, Woodland Hills, Calabasas area. Not really the epicenter for graffiti. We didn't have as much graffiti as the city, but we had a little bit of Cholo graffiti. We had a local neighborhood, Canoga Park. So I saw their writing on the walls, general like stoner graffiti, stuff like that. We had TCF really early. They date back to the mid-late 80s. And yeah, it was just like a natural fascination from 7, 8 years old, trying to figure out what the fuck it was. Had no idea what any of the stuff was, what any of it meant. I thought it was all the same. And then just trying to figure out what the difference between like graffiti and gang graffiti and just civilian graffiti was. And yeah, that was pretty much it.
So how did you start figuring it out? Did you have an older guy that started lacing you up on stuff?
No, I didn't have anybody.
You meet people?
I just looked at the walls. I had an uncle that lived in Silver Lake, right by the Sanborn Yard. So we go in the city, and the 101 was crushed back then. And then I remember the first, graffiti style name I could recognize was Ozone, who later turned his name to Nice. And he was up a grip. He was up all over the fucking place. He had all those, the old style bus benches. He had these like blue Ozone tags all over. And then I also remember he turned himself in, and it became like this story in the newspaper. And my mom knew I was already interested in graffiti because I got in trouble for like writing in the bathroom at school. And she's like, check out this guy. He thinks he's cool. And I thought he was cool as shit, But he also had this like funny story that he turned himself in because he like saw us like an old man buffing his tag. And I was like, I must have been like 9 years old. And I was like, that's kind of lame that he just turned himself in, but I was still still infatuated with it. I was just like, I remember when a school field trip to the train station on Alameda, and he had tags there, and that was super far. As far as like a 9-year-old, like that was really far from my house. So I was like, how could this even be the same person? And then I started seeing other tags. Mostly it was just Valley stuff, like STP and UFK and UTI and all the older crews, and just started piecing it together. And then I finally, and then gang stuff was popular at the time with Colors and that. So I was like, well, I know those two aren't the same things. I'm not like that's not who I am. I'm not like a tough, I don't know. I'm not even from a neighborhood, I didn't grow up on a block or anything. There's no like corner boys or anything like that. So, and then I also started like listening to rap music and maybe thought that was part of, they were all connected and stuff. And I started just, I was like your quintessential like suburban white kid that just like wanted this like urban experience with graffiti and the music and the dance and stuff like that.
But it sounds like you kind of had to discover it for yourself and kind of follow the clues.
It wasn't easy.
You had to kind of research it a little bit. Because a lot of the older generations, for example, had like subway art to refer to or movies. Yeah. But maybe it sounds like you kind of were just organically like feeling what was out there.
Well, what happened is my childhood home was in Canoga, which later turned into West Hills, but it was right next to Shadow Ranch Park. And my parents didn't want me to go to school in LA Unified. I would have gone to Canoga High. And I think they wanted to keep me away from, the blacks and the Mexicans, and they wanted to move us up to fucking Calabasas.
He would leave the comforts of his parents' home in this exclusive gated community north of LA. And then no fence, wall, or sign was high enough to escape his hand.
So I went to Calabasas, and that's not where I wanted to be. I want to live in the city, I thought that would be cool. And there's one kid, he brought subway art to school, and he claimed he was from WCA. It was this kid Jacob. No one's ever heard of him before. And he's like, yeah, I'm in WCA. I was like, oh, that's so cool, man. And he showed me a couple hand styles and stuff. And then there was another kid who was from Venice, and he claimed Shoreline. And he had like a Jerry curl with a mullet and a bleached mullet, and he catch like Shoreline tags, and I'd emulate those. So my first the first tags I tried to catch were kind of like black gang style hands. And then like I try to copy like Canoga hands, and then like whatever else I was seeing on the walls, maybe like the TCF tags. I would try to like emulate like like rage tags, but they were so wild I couldn't handle it. They are pretty wild. Yeah. So like I was more like it was easier to do like blocky tags and sort of build from that.
Yeah, I think a lot of writers, that's the way they start out. I know I started out mimicking logos of metal bands and stuff, like lightning bolt letters and logo stuff, like Metallica things and stuff like that. So I can relate to that. Sometimes the lettering, you look for different little things that have cool letters, and you start doodling. Cool. Now, who did you first make contact with that was an actual writer, from the scene and stuff?
That's a good question. So there was no writers at my high school, no real writers. But there's this one kid named Gary who was a skater, and skaters networked a little bit more. And he met who would eventually be Smog, but he wrote Swes at the time, SWES. And I caught.
Are you talking about the legendary Bones?
That's the one, yep.
Okay.
And, Gary wrote Canary at the time, and he got that from this guy, H12 at USC.
Get Up Stickers is the ultimate bombing sticker. Made from military-grade materials, these stickers are super easy to peel and were made for putting on tanks. So you know they're going to last. So click on the link below to submit your designs. You don't want to sleep on this.
And, this is like 1991. I'm still I still really don't know what the hell I'm doing. But where I grew up was like, it was about a half a mile from the freeway, 101. So we could walk from my house to the freeway, and we would literally just walk down the freeway, not dodge cars or anything. Like we would walk down the emergency lane, and we'd race to the next thing to tag on, where it was like a little sign.
So you guys were just mobbing all the way down?
The whole way. We'd bring bicycles on the freeway, and it would be like spray paint that we were stealing from people's garages and stuff like that. I remember we had a bunch of floral paint, like that Michael's design paint that smelled
really cool.
Yeah, it smelled fruity. And we're just like, it was blissful ignorance. Like we had no idea what the hell we were doing. Yeah. And we'd take out like a solid 2 miles of freeway.
Wow.
Like every single thing you could tag on, we'd ride on.
Wow. Yeah. And then at this point, what was your name? What were you writing?
So then I wrote Mean, MEAN, and I literally stole that from someone that wrote Mean in the neighborhood. He was probably pretty good at tagging in my memory, and I wasn't. And I wrote that for maybe like 6 months, and then I wrote like so many different words, and I wasn't really as attached to the words. I was like the action of the writing, and I wrote really, really silly things even before that. Like when I was just like tagging in bathrooms and drainage ditches and washes, and I like.
So you like the act of it.
I liked it. So it's like it's like I listen to rap music, so like I liked Ice-T, and I could write Ice-T cool, but like I'm not gonna write Ice-T on the wall. So I thought it'd be better to write Ice Top, which makes no sense at all. But like I call like a dozen tags of that, and then I would write like Rampage, or I'd write like all these weird words, and then I'd make up crews and but it was just like it's kind of like sweet childhood graffiti. I didn't know what mean streaks were. I thought they were crayons. Absolutely. Couldn't figure out fat caps. None of that stuff.
All right. So now you meet Swes, and he puts you on a little bit more into like the graffiti that's already the techniques and the stuff that's known. Krylon probably, right?
Yeah.
What were some of your first experiences now with more modern tools and kind of on a more advanced level? So how did you level up from there?
So Swes was from Van Nuys, which is Central Valley, and he had experience with like bus hoppers and stuff. I lived near the 161 bus, and that could take me to Ventura and Topanga, and I could catch the 424. And after like the initial contact with like doing freeway graffiti, the next step was Ventura Boulevard. And Ventura Boulevard was almost its own scene. You had writers that hang out, in Reseda, but everyone like centralized in at the Galleria in Sherman Oaks. So you go there, there's the Taco Bell there, And there's just a bunch of fucking taggers in there.
Skaters, taggers,
taggers. They're going through all the napkins, ordering waters, you know, because no one has any money. Like maybe one person gets like a bean burrito. And everything's getting tagged on. The tables are covered in scribes. The fake plants have Main Street tags and marker tags. And you'd be really excited because you go there and you'd hop off the bus and someone's hitting a bus across the street. And you get in there and you'd run I'd run into Swess. He's like, oh, you just missed all the STPs. Pale was here and da-da-da. I was like, holy shit, Smurf was here. I was like, oh my God. And, I'd see their tags on the walls. And as a kid, they're, it's sort of like this like sort of rock star thing. You're like, what do they even look like, And yeah, it was an entire scene, like I lived on the freeway and Ventura Boulevard.
So at this point now you're hooked.
Yeah, hook, line, and sinker. I'm there.
Okay,
I'm all about it. That's my whole life.
Good.
I'm tagging on buses. I'm tagging on freeways. I'm tagging on Ventura Boulevard. I'm not doing very good graffiti. I think I'm doing a lot of graffiti.
Okay. Did you find a solid name at this point?
So I bounced around with a couple names, and then I eventually get to the tag name Gank, G-A-N-K, and I pulled that from watching a Compton's Most Wanted video. And I was just like, I was obsessed with like West Coast gangster rap and Compton's Most Wanted, NWA, and Easy
Gank
P.
was a big word.
Yeah, it's very like
for
the era.
Yeah,
that word doesn't. It's like non-existent.
Yeah,
anymore.
fools got ganked and
all that dumb stuff. Yeah.
And so so you start hitting up Gank, you start getting that up. How'd you level up from there with Gank? Because I know you did make quite a bit of noise with that name.
I wrote a lot of graffiti with that word, and so I went to Calabasas High School in 9th grade. And I got kicked out at the start in 10th grade, and I went to continuation. And Calabasas is part of a small school district called Las Virgenes, and there's only 2 schools in that, 2 high schools, and they share the same continuation. So I went there, and the first day I went there, I met Fate, and this guy that wrote Gone, and this guy that later wrote Chunk, and he was claiming to be Deed from UTI at the time. And so like I was meeting a couple writers, and then Fate knew Hayes, AWR, and these guys were like, sort of comrades, and we were just like, I started painting a lot with Fate and Havoc. We started hitting the 101. Havoc had a car, so we'd start venturing out to the West Side, Venice, Motor, downtown, things like that. I met some of the AWRs early on in 92, 93.
At this point, does the AD crew form?
So AD started at our high school, and it was Fate, and it's from the Slayer song "Angels of Death."
Oh, okay.
And because Fate was I
was wondering what it meant. I never heard about it.
Yeah, he was like a metalhead goth dude. He had like black painted fingernails, and but he was also just totally wild, and he's still wild, and so it would be me, Fate, Chunk. Gone, Havoc. After that, Saber got in, and but yeah, and we do as much venturing in the city as we could, trying to hit the like the yards I said.
So you guys made a pretty big buzz on the freeway. I remember seeing it up.
We did a lot of freeway signs, all the sound walls. Fate, I was there when Fate hit his first Heaven in '92, and we just like pulled over on the freeway, climbed up some sign, climbed up the pole, got it there. Hit that, and then I hit the second one with him on the 405, like the same week. Then we hit another one on the 101 in like Studio City. And we were hitting fronts, because like people had hit in the backs before that, but not so much the fronts. And we were, not only were we like hitting the fronts, we were doing like as high as you could reach, like fill-ins to our feet. And I was doing, it hit local papers, it hit local news.
So it made a buzz around your area.
Yeah, and it caught the attention of the local cops.
So who was the mysterious GK? The vandal who eluded police while causing more than $100,000 in damage in LA County alone? Meet Tim Badalucco, Graffiti King. Now 20, he started tagging when he was just 13 years old.
I was always fascinated with it. It's like this whole mystery, and when I first got into it, it was like unfolding the mystery. It's kind of like an adventure.
And they built a case against me. And, I've been writing that word for maybe 2 years, tops. And then I was staying more in the Valley. I was having trouble at home. My parents gave me like ultimatums, like, you could either stay here or write graffiti. And I'm like, see ya. And I would stay at like these like graffiti crash houses. There was one in Van Nuys that this crew called UNA had. And it was like a graffiti flop house. There'd be like a dozen kids sleeping there overnight. Or I'd stay at new ETI's house. And I knew they were hot on my tail because like they popped a couple of other people and they asked about me. I was sort of a runaway at that point, and my mom filed a missing person report. And when they wrote aliases, she wrote Gank in there. So that was their first clue. And anyway, they raided that UNA house and News House the same morning. And they pulled us all into Van Nuys Station. And, you know, I was maybe 17, maybe 16. Probably 17. And, you know, there's a detective, this guy, Craig Rudy. And, you know, I didn't know my rights yet.
That guy was famous.
I mean, he busted a lot of people
Officer
in the valley.
Rudy.
Yeah,
I remember hearing his name and I've seen his picture in the paper maybe.
He busted a bunch of people. And he looked like, if you saw Roger Rabbit, you remember the evil detective? Yeah. He looked like that dude. He looked evil, you know? And I was a young kid and I thought I could like, you know, talk to the cops and outsmart them. And I was a fucking idiot. Like these guys are trained, you know, they know what's up. So they're like, do you know who Gank is? Like, I was like, yeah, I met him at a party. And they're like, all right, well, describe him. I'm like, I'd lose focus. I didn't know what the hell I was doing.
They're intimidating, you know, when you're a kid, you know,
they're
these
professionals.
big guys,
Yeah. So like, you know, word of the wise, just don't talk. You know? Just like, you're not going to beat them. They're like trained in it. So I got, that hit the news. Almost all of us went to camp. I spent like 6 months in a work camp out in Laverne. And that was awful. You know, it's really tough. There's like 120 kids in this camp, and like I think 3 of us were white, and 2 of us knew we were white. And yeah, I popped out the other side, and I didn't really know what to write.
So what basically happened is that you got pulled away from it. It didn't reform you, though. You still had it in your heart. You wanted to keep going.
No, it actually like upset me. Like I wanted to write more. I kind of like took it personally, and I made sure that once I was out, it was on. You know, like there's still more I wanted to do.
So now you're just looking for a new name.
I'm looking for a new name. You know, nowadays I think dudes get busted and they keep just writing the same word. And I was like, I've never been married to any of the names I've written, and I was like, I don't want that in my life. I don't want to worry about jail. I want to just fucking paint graffiti. So. You know, MSK is still pretty small at this point. I was already in AWR at this point. And I'm still basically like a valley writer. And I started hanging with the STPs a little bit. And I didn't know what to change my name into. I was writing GK1 and I was writing GEKAY, which is obviously horrible. And then I caught tags with Tulsa one night and he caught a GKAY tag. And I was like, oh, GKAE though, I like those letters, and that looks fucking sick.
Yeah, nice combo.
So, yeah.
Cool.
And then I took off, and I went pretty close to All City. I was never like All City bus rider.
You were more landmarks and freeways, right?
Freeways, my specialty, landmarks. But, you know, Valley to Long Beach, West Side to San Gabriel Valley.
The backs of signs that are high.
Tons of signs, stuff like that, yeah.
Cool, man, cool. And then, so now, at this point, are you starting to sketch and piece, or what's going on with that?
I'm doing a little bit of piecing. I'm trying to do a marriage of bombing and piecing, because AWR was really heavy on style and piecing, but I wasn't like skilled enough or have the patience enough to sit there at a wall for the most part. Like I did a couple of pieces, they probably weren't that great, but I wanted to do what like you know, like Oil and Gin and those like street bombers and freeway bombers are doing, but like, you know, spice it up a little bit, like add a little bit more, maybe put a little bit more color, maybe add some more dimensions, and something to make my stuff stand out a little bit.
Okay, cool. And that you did. And then, which brings me to the next topic. Now, you and Saber kind of team up and kind of went on a pretty good run on the freeways at that point, right? Like you guys started doing some rollers on bridges, some pieces that were like they're pretty much fill-in pieces on some pretty crazy spots, and there wasn't a lot of, people doing it to that piecing level. Like stylistically, they were a little better than what the other. I mean, Euler had stuff, but they had the real simple stuff, and you guys started kind of doing more like piecing. Talk about that run. Talk about your guys' thinking. Your conversations, whatever. Your vibe that you guys were on that pushed you to that level.
So I'm at Saber in '92, and he's a better artist. He's still a better artist. His mom and dad were artists. I don't really come from that background. He was pretty much painting drainage ditches and stuff. And I was like, yo, let's paint some fucking freeways. Let's go to the west side. Let's paint some city stuff, And yeah, so we were a good team, and we did that bridge on the 5. The bridge on the 5 I've been looking at since I was a little kid, because it was the one I'm talking about specifically. It's where these two freeways meet, so it's not just like 4 lanes and 4 lanes. It's like 4 lanes, and then connector lane, and connector lane. So it's like super, super wide. And it had been getting tagged on since the 80s. Like I remember mosquito bite tags across the whole thing forever. And then oil hit it pretty good. But then I had this idea to hang over the top and do rollers and just like take out 4 lanes of pop. Like I took out 4 lanes, Saber took out like 4 or 5 lanes. And, there wasn't even a ton of like roller graffiti back then, and I had that spot planned before I went to camp, and I just sat on it forever. No one did it.
So you had your eyes set on that spot.
I had my heart set on it. I would sit in my fucking jail bunk thinking about it. And,
and that turned out to be a classic burner.
It was a good one, yeah.
It's a classic burner. Yeah. So that one definitely is something we're going to show up on the on the screen, because it was something that people took note of. It was like a game, elevation changer. Bam.
And it was top to bottom. So those letters, I want to say the bridge was like 10 feet tall. So I had to hang over the top to do the top of the letters, and I climbed down.
There was saber holes in your legs?
No, just hanging over as far as I could. And then I went down on the ledge and I outlined. And that entire area was covered in graffiti at the time. There was like people shooting dope on the bridge. We were up there. It's like a wild area. And now it's like I think it's a transit bridge. Like it was an abandoned bridge when we painted it, but not anymore.
Oh, okay. Now it actually has activity and stuff.
There's something to it, yeah.
Stuff, yeah. Cool. And then so you guys hit that. You guys started hitting a lot of spots. Now, at this point, you guys are MSK. Tell me the story of how you guys kind of like now got picked up and are part of this bigger thing going on now.
Sure. So MSK was created by Baba. He thought of the name. He pulled it from an old punk band from the early 80s called Mad Society, which is a legit old LA band. And there was AWR. So Baba started it. They had like a couple guys that were riding it, and then it sort of fizzled. People were really focused on AWR. And, I came around, and Faye came around, and we were hungry, we were active, but we were probably not that good style-wise. So Eclipse took me under his wing, and I kept running away from home. Like my home life was awful.
How did you beat those guys? Because aren't they from like the west side, from another part?
Well, that's what I was in high school. Fate knew Hayes, and Hayes knew Tyke and Summit, and I think it was Tyke and Summit that originally met the West Side guys.
Through the skating scene, right?
And graffiti.
Okay.
Maybe even like raving. It was one of those things, So I was introduced to those guys, and I remember them like clowning me because I was like toy. And, I remember like asking Eclipse one of the first times I hung out with him. I was like, what do you think the best crew is in LA? Do you think it's WCA or do you think it's da-da-da-da? He's like, I think AWR is the best crew. And I was like, he's like, you think like a toy. And I was like, okay.
Wow. Well, hey, that's
but he was like showing me styles. Yeah. He's really good at tagging, really good at piecing. And I was doing my best to grasp these concepts of like letter structure and how to translate that from paper to walls and freeways and, high pressure situations, which is way different. Sometimes you sketch something out and you get there and like on a real spot and it doesn't work, So I'm like, I'm figuring this part out. And we were meant to be like this like baby crew. And it would be like, we'd be in this crew, and once we got good enough, we would get into AWR. And, we got active. We took almost all the AD guys got into MSK. Not all of them, but most of them. There's only like 10 of us, 12 of us or something like that. And then we started fucking crushing shit, and we started putting other people in. And then AWR back then would have meetings all the time at the park by Motor. And we'd like kind of sort of tag along. And then like, you know, they'd be like, all right, it's AWR time. You MSK's got to stand on the other side of the park. And we're like, fuck, man, well, that kind of sucks, you know, kind of getting sunned. But then, you know, we were doing so much stuff, like it got to a point where like, they're like, all right, you guys, if you guys want to be in AWR, that's cool. Like, what do you guys want to do with MSK? Like, and we could have deaded it. We could have been like, all right, we're just AWR. But then like, we sort of like found our own lane. And I was like, you know, let's do MSK. Let's have these two crews. And like, let's, you know, MSK will be like.
You guys put a lot of work into it.
We done. Yeah, we did. And we thought that we could do our own thing, you know, like, you know, AWR definitely had their bombers, you know, like Read and Alert and Might and these like, you know, Fable and Hayes definitely did like street stuff. But we're like, let's
But for the most part, they're focused on piecing and more like,
you know, Motor and Venice and like the West Side.
But intricate stuff, right? Like
More
a
or
lot
less,
of colors, a lot of, you know, more of the
yeah.
production type stuff.
Heavily stylized letters.
Yeah, stylized.
Yeah.
And MSK, I noticed, was a little more on the bombing tip.
A little rough, yeah. Yeah, like we were okay with using stock tips and doing scrappy fills and stuff like that, you know.
Cool. So now you guys join up, you link up with AWR, and then you guys in the 2000, when did you guys go to San Francisco and start creating a buzz
90s.
out there?
Late
Okay,
90s.
that was in the 90s.
Yeah,
so tell us
like,
a little bit about how that adventure, how you ended up out there.
So Bless went up to SF first, Bless AWR, and he brought like a strong LA style. You know, SF was more like smaller tags and like character throw-ups, tons of tags. And Bless was doing like high quality pieces on rooftops and stuff. Not saying people didn't do that in
By
SF.
himself out there?
By himself, yeah. And Gone and Lone went up and lived up there for a little while, and then Fate was always visiting up there. And then Saber started going to art school up there, and him and Revoke became roommates. So we had Fate, Bless, Revoke, Saber, especially Revoke, Saber, and Fate. They were doing a lot of graffiti, and Cider also. And they were ruffling feathers. I don't know if they were going over people or what the deal was, but it was sort of like that old school out of towner mentality, like you're not from around here, so like, you know, get out of here. And San Francisco started this whole crew against us called United Bay. And there were like a couple of fist fights and dissing back and forth, but it was really like they were kind of testing us. And the homies were up for the challenge, and you know, we'd come up there, me and a couple other people, we'd come up from LA and you know, put in work, and it was great. You know, it's like that was sort of like what we would do with other cities too. You know, like move in other cities, paint a bunch, ruffle feathers, and but then, you know, it all works out. It's just graffiti in any way.
You guys made a pretty good connection with a guy named Ty. I believe he passed away around when you guys knew him, right?
He was murdered. Yeah.
Okay, well, can you talk about that for the history for the LA heads that might not know about that?
So I didn't really know Ty. I met him once. He was super high energy, super spastic, outrageous bomber. Just it's fucking tons and tons of graffiti. And I don't know if he had like, he was special. I don't know what like a diagnosis was on him. You know what I mean? So, but he lived with Fate and MQ. They're all roommates. And I mean, he was like your classic, like old school writer. Like always had paint on his hands, on his shoes. All his clothes are destroyed. You know, he wrote like 2-3 different names. And it was incredibly tragic when he got murdered, because he was not like a physically intimidating person. And he was climbing up some spot in the Tenderloin in SF, and some fucking psychopath that was paranoid was sitting inside his loft with a gun. And he popped out some door, and Ty tried to run away, and he murdered him in cold blood, and then got away with it. No charges, no nothing. Wow. Yeah.
And you guys did like a giant ship memorial. I mean, that was legendary.
That was MQ and Fate and this other dude. And that sat there.
It was like a
on
roller
the dock.
on a ship.
Yeah, they did Rust-Oleum bucket paints, and it sat there on this dock. I forgot, it took them 2 or 3 nights or something dumb like that. There's actually a time where it got detached from the dock and it was drifting.
Wow.
And it crashed on what's that island in between?
Treasure Island?
Yeah, Treasure Island.
Wow.
And it was like smashed into that thing. And then they pulled it out and then they got it back in use and would like go across the Pacific Ocean.
Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy story.
Yeah.
Did they buff the typees?
I don't know. What happened. It probably got scrapped or something.
Okay.
You know, it's an old boat. Yeah.
Okay. And then, so now you guys come back from that whole thing. What was your next focus as a team or a crew or individual?
Well, for me, I like I said, I kind of went lightweight all city in the mid '90s, and then I went up to Seattle, and I got caught doing dumb shit in Seattle.
So just because I know Swess, the guy you mentioned earlier, he became Smog and he started bombing out there, right? And you guys re-linked together years later and went on a crazy run with Power too?
Yeah, I lived with Power for a second, and then Krull and Rot, and Krull and Rot are West Valley guys like me. Power's a Valley guy like me too. And
so it's like you had this whole little reunion.
Yeah, it's a bunch of Valley dudes up in Seattle. And I got in trouble up there. I knew, but I didn't really know what the extent of, there was an investigation against me in LA. Excuse me. And there were detectives and they were building files. And this is early internet days also. So there were AOL chat rooms, and a different detective found out that I was in Seattle. Calls up the local authorities, says keep an eye out for this dude. I got arrested like 3 times in a week.
At Seattle? In
Seattle. I got caught tagging. I got caught doing fucking donuts on a school lawn. And I got caught at a party, like not really doing anything. It was like cops trying to break up a party. But yeah, they pulled me in. They're like, yo, you have a $100,000 warrant in California. And I was high on mushrooms. It definitely fucked up my trip. I'm sitting on a jail cell and the walls are breathing. And, the cop at first he's like, we're just trying to break up the party. We'll like let you go in a couple hours. And I was like, cool. And then he comes back and he's like, I'm not going to let you go.
The alert came up on his thing that you were wanted kind of. Yeah.
So that's God, what year is that? 96. And I got extradited from Seattle to LA. Spend 4.5 months in county, take a shitty plea bargain, which is like probation, massive restitution, massive 1,000 hours community service. I changed my name again. I write Chevy. At this point, like MSK has gained a lot of steam. Like we got like, our South Central guys. We've grown a little bit more. We're starting to get a little bit of rep.
So it sounds like as a crew, you're gaining steam, but personally, now you're starting to feel the weight of like the.
Well, I didn't feel it yet.
Okay.
So like I'm building, I'm painting, I'm doing as much as I can. I'm racking as much as I can. I'm painting as much as I can. And then I get busted again, and I'm already on probation. So like.
Now this is at Chevy?
Yeah. So I'm at the mercy of my probation officer at this point.
Yeah.
And he recommends 3 years. So I went to prison, got myself a state number. I guess prior to going, MSK is growing. So a couple of things that changed the path of MSK was a couple of the guys we brought in the crew. So we had like, it was a big deal when we got like Chico and Bruin in, and a couple other people, Tribe. These were like LA riders. We're Valley riders and West Side riders. These were like city riders. And, Revoke was and then after that, after those guys, we put Revoke in. And
he's from Atlanta?
No, Revoke's from Riverside.
Okay.
But he spent time in Atlanta and time in Miami. And I met him, Saber met him originally. And Saber had asked him in the crew, and he said himself he wasn't ready to be put in the crew. But I was watching him, and he was active, and he was, the way he was handling himself was, professional. And I put him in the crew. But Saber really did put him in the crew. But and prior to Revoke, we put Zess in. So Zess, without Zess and Revoke, I don't think MSK would have turned into what it did.
In other words, they leveled it up to the next step.
Yeah, and
You guys laid a strong, certain foundation.
Yeah, I
They
helped
were
lay
able
the
to take it a
foundation.
little- yeah.
I poured the concrete, and you know these
They
guys are
framed
doing
it up.
detail work. Yeah, they're framing it up. You know, Zest was a baby when he got on the crew. Revoke was a little bit older. So then I stumbled. Then I start doing time. So not only did I spend the time in, it's like that first year out, like I'm like kind of
You're
trying to chill a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, like slightly traumatized. Like prison
Well,
fucking sucks.
you did 3
know?
years, right?
Well, I did a year and a half on
Okay.
it, and it was like I'm not a jail dude. Like I don't like. It's not my fucking scene. Like I'm not from a neighborhood. I'm not like particularly good at fist fighting. I'm not into all that, the politics of that shit. I don't like all that racial stuff. So like once I was like starting to wrap up parole or trying to wrap up parole, I had to make a decision. Like if I'm going to write graffiti, I got to get the fuck out of here. It's not like today where like graffiti is almost legal at this point.
Yeah.
Like they were still so fucking harsh and the penal system was so fucking harsh. So I'm like, if I have any chance of like continuing to do this stuff, I got to go. And my first hookup outside of LA was Atlanta. So I stayed there for 6 months. You know, I found a different word to write. And then I moved to New York and I was there for almost 5 years. And then I moved to Philly and I've been in Philly 18 years now. So I've spent my adult life on the East Coast for the most part.
And what's the vibe for as a bomber out there? Was it a little, since these are places that have been super bombed, does that mean that there's a little more liberty to be able to bomb without worrying about cases and all that kind of stuff?
Well, New York can be kind of a police state. When I first moved out there nothing had really been buffed yet. So it's like I remember being a kid in LA and going to downtown and it hadn't been buffed yet. And then it breaking my heart when they like wiped that shit out. And then they kept wiping it out. So it's like you couldn't get shit to run on the roll down gates. Rooftops would get buffed. And it was hot. It's like when you used to go to downtown in the early 90s, you know, you'd have like, let's say you have 4 or 5 cans on you and you walk down the street, you go through all your paint and then you either come back on the bus or you come in the car and you can't even see your shit because it's just layered and layered and layered and layered. Like there's just so much graffiti. So when you wipe it all out and then you go down those same streets and you use like 4 or 5 cans, your shit's standing out. And so I watched LA get buffed. And then when I moved to New York got buffed. And I was like, fuck, is the buff following me? Like, how did this fucking happen, you know? And then like, that shit hurts, you know? Like there's, the city is never the same after the initial buff. There's something about like the texture and the old dusty tags. It's like really fucking cool.
It does change everything.
Yeah.
Because there's something about seeing old tags and rust
Absolutely.
and all that, the textures and the
Yeah.
patinas on the surfaces and stuff.
And the sun
Once
bleaching
it's
them out.
buffed,
Yeah.
something's weird about
And
it.
the old paint was different. The old hand styles were
Right.
different. You lose all that history. So then I moved down to Philly, and Philly had already been buffed. Philly actually has the oldest anti-graffiti. Yeah. They started this.
In what, spray can art, they talked about it, right?
They were born the same day as the Mural Arts Foundation. They're like, they're brothers. And Mural Arts has tried to like distance themselves because like they don't want to be associated with something that's called anti, because there's negative connotations to that. And also graffiti is a little bit more accepted nowadays. So yeah, Philly's getting a lot of graffiti. It's like a lot of the cities in America now. Like they all went sort of through this buff period, and now they're all getting crushed again.
Cool. Did you get to connect with writers and learn some of the Philly history and all that sort of thing? And
when I moved to New York, I probably should have wrote more graffiti, but I got sidetracked by enjoying like New York lifestyle, like getting drunk, popping pills, like.
Is that New York lifestyle?
Just the party atmosphere,
Okay.
because the bars close at 4, and then there's
okay.
like after hours, and just like you're in this like this massive city that you can like walk around. It's not like LA where you got to jump in the car for everything. So you can like hit like a dozen bars in a night, and you're just getting shit faced, and you have like 2-3 markers in your pocket, and you're just like, you don't know where you are if you're an out of towner, and you're just going through your supplies, and you're having a good time, and then maybe the next day you find some of your tags, and they're kind of fucked up, and. But when I moved to Philadelphia, I'd had a son in New York, and I moved to Philly, and I was like, I'm gonna stop the social stuff. I'm just gonna like be a dad, and maybe write graffiti. I got like a square job, and essentially I made a conscious effort to not be part of the scene in Philadelphia. And
in other words, you chose it more like for a family place.
Family thing. I was like, I'd done the scene stuff.
Yeah.
You know, like I was good. Like I've met all the writers. I don't need to meet any more writers pretty much. Like I know what it is, you know. And there's also that disappointment thing too. It's like never meet your idols. So it's like I'd gone through all that. And even also when I moved to New York, it's like I'm meeting these guys. I'm like, you're not as cool as I thought you were going to be. You know, you're like smoked out, man. Like,
yeah.
And not all of them were. Like I met, you know, plenty of good writers too. But like, I just made the choice when I got to Philly. I was like, I got changed up a little bit.
Yeah. It's a part of the process of life, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you have a family, there's a certain weight of responsibility to it because now you're responsible. You brought in this person, they're depending on you, and that's sometimes your own self things that you want to do, you have to put to the side. And
I think two things happen when you have a kid. It either changes your life or it doesn't. And there might be something wrong with you if it doesn't change your life. So I wanted to not be like a scrappy bus chasing tagger. I wanted to be a dad.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, much respect. I can respect that.
Thank you.
So taking it from that point on, though, you still, because of your experience, because of, the status that you earned in the game, I believe that you still, the crew still, you help them out still. You still kind of maybe guide or whatever, right? Is that where you're at in your position now?
Yeah, I got like a senior role in the crew at this point. I still, the stars align. I'm still going to write graffiti. I like painted a freeway spot last week in Philly, and I felt fantastic. I got 3 freeway spots in a week, and I felt like I was highly active. But I'm not highly active. I just I just knocked a couple out. But for the crew, I just like no one's expecting me to be all city anymore. Yeah. Like I put in my work at the proper time when you're like a teenager and you're young 20s, whatever. And but yeah, I help like facilitate like meetings and connections between people. And I'm like a cheerleader for my crew, like I just want everyone to get along and support each other and build bonds and friendships and, Yeah,
it's important in crews. If you don't have people helping to steer, help, or whatever the situation, people can eventually just go their ways and not be really united.
Yeah.
So that's good.
And it takes work. It's not like it just happens.
Work. Yeah.
Like you have to work on it.
Crews stay active and strong because it takes work.
Yeah.
Talk about Gabrielle. You come out on a talk show, and I got to see it. Gabrielle show, I believe, was an old talk show that used to happen in the 90s, right? Yeah. And man, there was writers in the audience. I saw like Tribe and Snap and who else? Bunch of people knew Oil.
Eclipse.
Yeah.
Chunk, my ex-girlfriend, this guy Shane. Bunch of people were there. And then Skept, of course, was on stage with me.
That's right. So talk about that. What was that all about? And we'll put a few clips in there for the people.
Gang tagger. I would just like to tell you that there's about right now in '95, there's about 20% of the graffiti world that is down for graffiti, that's down for like doing the artistic work, that respects like most of the things that you're complaining about. And the 80% that became trendy, go to college, and the 80, hey, you know what? The 80% that like turned into like people that don't respect.
I'm a writer, straight up, and that's what I'm gonna clarify. There's a difference between taggers, writers, and graffiti artists, and there's a difference between bombing and scribbling your name on the wall.
What's that cross mean to you? What does that mean to you? Don't you love Jesus Christ?
Graffiti has nothing to do with Jesus Christ, huh?
Yeah, it was Skept was the one that like linked it up. And it was supposed to be like a yin yang thing. They wanted him to be like the positive writer, which is funny if you know Skept. He was the positive writer.
Yet, what other routes or alternatives is there out there for a lot of these young kids who don't know, who are the ignorant ones, who are the ones who are tagging these people's property? There are some to a certain extreme who are ignorant.
And there was me, who was like the shithead.
There's a lot of people that want to bust me for a lot of the damage I've done.
Yeah?
And I just don't want to get in trouble for it again.
You've gotten in trouble in the past. What's happened?
I got in jail a couple times.
But you still do it?
Hell yeah.
And I think they wanted me to be to say all like the the typical stuff they said to writers about expression, and I went up there and I was just talking shit.
You had a disguise on too, or something?
I had a wig on, and I had a bandana on, I had glasses on, and a hat, and
so you're almost like in a villain role.
Yeah, I was, and the fucking crowd hated me, and they had anti-people up there. The people in the crowd were upset. They were really like they're on fire. And like there were these dudes sitting behind the homies, and they were starting a problem with the homies. Like they were talking shit, and like. They had to leave this exit, and we had to leave that exit.
So it got tense in there.
Yeah, it was
passions flew, huh?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Now this is what the last topic I want to talk about is. I'd like to pick your brain, and I'd like to know what your opinion is on new graffiti. Now, the way you come back home to your old stomping grounds, you see it everywhere. As a matter of fact, Drew, this is going to be kind of old by the time this show probably airs.
Right.
But. This is Drew kicked me down this shirt of those LA graffiti towers that are like legendary at this kind of time.
Yeah.
And so all this stuff's happening now. It's just a different world now. There's the internet is so it plays a big part in things.
For sure.
All this sort of thing. It's kind of more acceptable, like you said earlier. But I want to know what goes through your head as you meditate and focus and just see the world as it's changed in the graffiti scene.
I think it's cool that guys and girls are still going out there and painting, because in the 90s, it almost felt like it might just die. It might just like putter out. You know, we had the issues with the gang stuff. And I feel like within a couple of years, we went from like this like incredibly active scene to just like a trickle, you know, like most of the dudes were like, you know, the idea back then was you can't be a writer after 20. Like, what kind of loser would do that? Where now the demographic is like, it's more white kids. There's also almost no black crews, you know. So that whole aspect's changed. But like, you come to LA and like, there's an energy again, and it's really cool to see. And you know, I think when the buff first hit, it was like we have a way to combat this, and it doesn't really work the same way anymore. Like if kids are active and they're going out there and they're putting the work, it takes more effort to buff than it does to paint. And if enough people are painting, it's hard for the buff to catch up. And it's great. I mean, if you're doing like decent enough, you don't have to be super awesome at graffiti. Like if you're just doing good enough graffiti and you're going out there and you're risking your ass, I'll probably like your stuff. You know, you're keeping it alive.
It's almost like you're saying it's like a numbers thing now. Kind of like the way
but it's also like like
if enough people do it, it really can't be stopped. Is that kind of like what you're saying?
That's part of it, but it's like the culture's still alive. Because I thought the culture was going to die for a little bit there. And that'd be fucking sad, you know? Like New York lost their trains. We lost our freeways at one point. People are crushing trains in New York again. And people are crushing freeways here. So, I mean, where there's a will, there's a way. You know, I thought that it was just going to go out of style. It hasn't gone out of style. And just like, you know, this is still a relatively new art form. So it's like, you got to think of like, if you can relate it to music, you know, like rap music's not that old compared to like jazz or whatever, you know, like graffiti's here to stay now. It's going to be here forever, you know. That's great.
Cool. Well, any last words, thoughts, anything like you'd like to express?
No, just my crews, MSK,
Shout out.
P30, all the other ones.
All right, cool. Well, with that being said, I want to tell you that, you know, first of all, I appreciate you coming, taking the time to come out here, and much respect, my brother. God bless, and look forward to getting your tag up on the Wall of Fame.
That's right. I got a mark on my pocket.
All right.
Yep.
I figured you would.
Yeah.
Because time is our most precious resource, always remember that every minute, every second, and every moment matters. So let's do our best to live a kind, compassionate, and loving life. And God willing, we'll see you in the next episode. 1.
Monstro. Rocker, Dali. The natives are restless. Yeah, I say the natives are restless. The natives are restless. Rocker, Irish science. Let's go, let's go. Yo, let's gather here a second, taking the atmosphere. As I steer this vessel like a Chevrolet Cavalier, I'm a native to this culture, chasing vultures up out of here. Fuck out of here, a lot of work put in like Vladimir. We dismissing fear. Listen here, if your loyalty shifts over clout to the point where you disappeared and disappear, you overlooked those who wrote the book. How does that work? How you a factor when there's gaps in your chapters? Let's cancel the chatter off the grid, damage your scanner, shed some light in this tavern, and hold this mic just like a lantern. I don't settle for the standard or nestle in the pasture, turn a happy camper into a snack for a pack of panthers. My pops would often reminisce on the mothership landing, and then become sad in it how the brothers disbanded over money mismanaged and traditions.